Glad to be here tonight. We are in the book of Daniel on Wednesday nights. The book of Daniel. I'm having a little trouble with my screen up there, but that's okay. The book of Daniel. And we're in chapter number 4. Now, let me give you a preview of what's going on. In chapter 1, we had the captivity. Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon brought Israel into captivity. And that's what chapter 1 was about. And then chapter 2, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. And it was a dream of this guy, the head of gold, pictured the Babylonian Empire. And then the Medes and the Persians, the breast was of silver, and then bronze, the Greek, and then the Roman Empire, and then the 10 toes of Daniel's image. And so if you laid that thing down, it shows you the world powers when Babylon ruled, and then the Medes and the Persians, and of course the Greeks under Alexander the Great, and then the Roman Empire under Julius Caesar, and then all the way down to who is going to show up in the tribulation period, which is the Antichrist, which represents these 10 toes. That's a bad picture of an image, but that's the best drawing that I've got for myself. And then chapter number 3 is a very familiar story about what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You remember that story? 3 Hebrew boys thrown in the furnace of fire. That's what chapter 3 was about. Now, chapter number 4, Nebuchadnezzar's done dreamed another dream. And this is what we're going to be looking at. So, look at chapter number 4 and Nebuchadnezzar. Let me just give you the background real quick. Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 1 is very powerful, very, very privileged. And then he begins to be very prideful. And anytime a person starts to be prideful, there's a verse in the Bible, what is it, Proverbs 16:18, that says, pride goeth before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. And so God has a way to bring men down to the level where they need to be. He always has that way. And so what he does, God gives Nebuchadnezzar this dream of this big, humongous tree. And this tree gets cut down and all of this kind of thing, and it spooks Nebuchadnezzar. So he brings in Daniel and he says, hey, tell me what this dream's all about. And so this is what chapter number 4 is all about. I think you'll find it interesting. It's about 37 verses. We won't read all of. We will read all of them throughout the night, but not all at one time. Look at verse number 1. Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from everlasting to everlasting. Now, Nebuchadnezzar's doing the talking in the first 3 verses, and it sounds like, man, Nebuchadnezzar's a changed man. I mean, he sounds like he's a changed man, talking about the signs and wonders of God and all of this kind of thing, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Sounds like a different man. So what happens is, verses 1, 2, and 3 is Nebuchadnezzar fixing to tell you how he got right with the Lord. He's fixing to go, when he starts in verse 4, he's fixing to say, look, where I am today, God give me this dream. You think about this. This is the way God got Nebuchadnezzar's attention. In chapter number 2, he gave him the dream of this guy. Brings Daniel in, says, Daniel, tell me about this. What does it mean? Of course, Daniel comes in and says, hey, one of these days, the Medes and the Persians are going to take down your kingdom. I hate to tell you that, but that's the way it is. And then the next kingdom that comes, the Greek Empire under Alexander the Great, they're going to come and whoop them, and they'll be the world power. And then later on, it's going to be the Roman Empire when Jesus is born and all that kind of thing. And then chapter number 3, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar builds an image. Y'all bow down when you hear the music. Well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego says, we're not bowing down. They throws them in the fiery furnace. They didn't burn, and they come out alive. And so Nebuchadnezzar's like, Well, this is the way it is with a lot of pagan religions. They don't mind believing in the God that we believe in, as long as you allow them to keep their others too. So Nebuchadnezzar's like, I believe in my gods. And y'all's God looks like he did pretty good delivering the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego out of the fiery furnace. I'll just add him to my collection of gods. Because if he can do that, I'll put him with mine. And boy, and you would be surprised when you go to these other countries all around the world. Yes, they want to believe in Jesus Christ, but they want to keep their others too, because in their mind, they think heaven is like, you've got the Muslim God over here, and you've got the Buddhist God over here, and all of them are up there together, like in a courtroom setting, and all of them are up there deciding the fate of our lives. And so the more of those gods you got on your side, but I got news for you. There's not but one God up there. And it's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So Nebuchadnezzar is sort of like, okay, hey, I'll accept your God and mine too. And so after chapter 3, okay, God says, all right, we have to get just a little tough with you, trying to get his attention. If you'll remember, God did another king the same way. His name was Pharaoh. Remember that? The only difference with Pharaoh is Pharaoh never turned to God. And so Pharaoh wound up dying in the Red Sea. God tries. He's long-suffering to us. We're not willing that any should perish, but that all would come to repentance. And he tries and he works and he's trying. And so he's trying with Nebuchadnezzar. So he gives Nebuchadnezzar a dream. He starts in verse number 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might know unto me, or make known unto me, the interpretation of the dream. Then came the magicians and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, that they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar. And you remember Nebuchadnezzar changed Daniel's name to Belteshazzar, okay? According to the name of my God, notice, small G-O-D, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. Remember, see, Nebuchadnezzar thinks this just, all the gods are up there. And the more of them you have on your side, that's just not the way it is. And so, whom the spirit of the holy gods, and before him I told the dream, saying, O Belteshazzar, talking to Daniel, master of the magicians, because I know the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. Thus were the visions of mine. In my bed I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Pause. Does that ring a bell with anybody? You remember in Genesis chapter number 11 where Nimrod, the Tower of Babel, they tried to build a tower to reach unto God. Well, now we have this tree, and the vision that Nebuchadnezzar sees is this tree that is built up into heaven, reached unto heaven, verse 11, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. Verse 12, the leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beast of the field had shadow under it. And the fowls of the heaven dwell in the boughs thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. Now let me pause and just interject something real quick in verse 12. Nebuchadnezzar, he's a kingdom. He's a king. He's the king of Babylon. He's very powerful. He's very privileged. God's given us this image, and this tree that God is the Babylon. The tree is Nebuchadnezzar. Watch it. The Babylonian government. Humongous tree. All the animals find shelter under here. Everybody is fed under this tree. Watch where I'm going. It's socialism. If you want to be fed in the kingdom, you have to come up under that tree to be fed, under that government. There's where we're headed, ladies and gentlemen. Whether you like it or not, that's where we're headed. And that is very prophetic. That's where the mystery Babylon, and we'll get to that in just a second. Now, just wanted to throw that in there. Verse number 13, I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and a holy one come down from heaven. These watchers in heaven, the angelic host it's almost like a military. It's in ranks. You've got cherubims, seraphims, you have archangels, you've got your regular ministering angels and all that kind of thing. It's almost like they're in ranks. And that's what it appears to be. Even Satan has his angelic host in ranks. Ephesians chapter 6, remember? Why do we have to put on the whole armor of God? To fight off the principalities, powers of darkness, rulers over high places, all those ranks of even the underworld. The devil has those kinds of things. And so these watchers, I'm assuming, is some type of rank of an angel. Verse 14, he cried aloud and said thus, hewn it down, cut off its branches, shake off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the beast get away from under it, and the fowls from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass and the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beast of the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belshazzar, talking to Daniel, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of the kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the Spirit of the holy gods is in thee. Now, that's the first 18 verses. Here's the vision. Nebuchadnezzar goes to bed, and he's got a vision. It's a big, humongous tree. That tree pictures the Babylonian Empire. That tree pictures Nebuchadnezzar. Great, powerful. Everybody's feeding. Everybody's getting shade under this big old tree. And all of a sudden, some angel from heaven, some watcher from heaven comes down and says, cut the tree down. Make the birds leave and all the cattle, all this kind of stuff, and disperse this. And then this is what it says. I don't know if you caught it. But it says, in this dream, Nebuchadnezzar is banished and taken a man's heart away from him and put a beast's heart inside him. And now Nebuchadnezzar is forced to run around like an animal in the field. In a few minutes, we're going to find out that Nebuchadnezzar grew feathers like an eagle, claws. He'd run around on all fours. The man lost his mind. And they banished him out, and he's running around like an animal out there. You say, why would God do that? God will get your attention some way, somehow. And he's trying to get Nebuchadnezzar's attention. And he tries to give him a dream to straighten him up. Now, here's what Daniel's like. Okay, here we go. Verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was, now notice this word in the King James, astonished. It's where we get our word astonished. You see the root word stoned? When Daniel heard this image, Daniel it was like astonished, stoned. He was like, when he heard this image, he was like, wow, like a stone person. Astonished, that's where we get our word from, okay? He was astonished for 1 hour. Now, he wasn't stoned, but he just looked like he was. For 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake, said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thy enemies. What Daniel said, he said, Nebuchadnezzar, I wish this dream was about your enemies and those that hate you. I wish it was. But, buddy, this dream's about you. I hate to tell you. I hate to be the one to tell you. And that's why Daniel was so troubled. Verse 20, the tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached into heaven, and the sight thereof all the earth, whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and it was meat for all, under the which the beasts of the field dwell, and upon those branches the fowls of heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong. For thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth. Can you see Nebuchadnezzar? His chest is swelling. He's like, that's me? That's me? Daniel's probably like, hang on, it ain't over. Verse 23, and whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven, saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with the band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. 7 years. For 7 years. 24, this is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my Lord the king, that they shall drive thee, now watch verse 25, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as an oxen. And they wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth to whoever he will. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after that thou hast known that the heavens do rule. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable. Now wait, let me stop and say this before we read verse 27. Daniel tells him the dream. And he says, you're that tree, and it's going to get cut down. And you're going to be banished from your kingdom. You're going to run around like the beasts of the field. Run around like an animal for 7 years. Now watch this. You say, what prophetic stuff is that? Remember, Nebuchadnezzar's a man. He's turned into a beast for 7 years. In the tribulation period, a man will be turned into a beast, Revelation 13. For how long? 7 years. He's called the Antichrist. Nebuchadnezzar's a picture of that Antichrist. You say, how do you know? Well, you can turn to Revelation 17, and it says, Mystery Babylon the Great. In Revelation 17, talks about how she's going to fall. Well, that's the big tree that just got cut down. All of this in Daniel is pointing to what's going to happen in the tribulation period. And so what Daniel does in verse 27, he tells him this whole thing. God's trying to get your attention, King Nebuchadnezzar. Verse 27, wherefore, O king, Let my counsel be acceptable unto thee. In other words, please hear me. And break off thy sins by righteousness, and thy iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Nebuchadnezzar, please, if this dream is true, and it is, you need to turn from your sin and turn to God. Now watch what happens. Verse 28. All this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. And at the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. Now watch. All right, get the picture. He's got the dream. Daniel came in, told him the dream. You're going to get cut down. For 12 months, nothing happened. 12 months, nothing happened. Have you ever noticed this? 12 months, that's a year, right? Have you ever noticed that the first of every year, people make New Year's what? How long do they last? It's almost like, okay, Daniel, I heard you. I'm gonna turn over a new leaf. I'm gonna do good. It's a New Year's resolution for me. For 12 months, nothing happens. And Nebuchadnezzar's like, then he's walking around. He's walking around in his palace, looking around at all of he can't even see it all of his kingdom. Now watch what's fixing to happen. He's looking over the kingdom, looking at it all. And this is what happens. You got to watch. Verse number 29. At the end of 12 months, he walked in the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. Watch what he says. The king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? Daniel, I think you forgot about your dream. Because now he's walking around looking, is this not great Babylon that I built? Look how great and mighty I am. Now, there's always a lesson. You ever heard the terminology, the bigger they are, the harder they fall? That is true. The bigger they are, the bigger they think they are, the harder they come down. Always. You can mark it down. Now watch what happens. Verse number 31. While the word was in the king's mouth, he ain't even got done talking. There fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as an oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou knowest the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whoever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. Can you imagine that? And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar. Now, wait, let me see, verse 34. Okay, all right, that's look at verse, the end of 33. That's where he goes out, and I don't know. I mean, I've seen pictures, and of course, nobody knows what he looks like. But you imagine a guy that used to stand on 2 feet. Now he's out in the field on all fours. He's growing feathers like an eagle and got claws, his claws like a bird. He's running around like an animal. God is trying to get his attention. And he's that way out in the middle of the field for 7 years, running around, eating grass like an ox. Now, verse 34. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, all right, so it's over. After 7 years, he returns to his right mind. It appears that Nebuchadnezzar just went insane. And we've seen those kind of people that are troubled in that way. You've even seen in some, when you study all of this kind of thing, you've seen people who actually think they're animals. They act like they're an animal, and they're insane. Their mind is not right. Well, this is the way Nebuchadnezzar was. And he wasn't in his right mind, and for 7 years, that's the way he was. Then verse 34, at the end of my days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up my eyes into heaven, and my understanding returned unto me. So I'm in my right mind again. What'd he do? I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever and ever, whose dominion is everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doeth according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, what doest thou? Now, when God does stuff, what Nebuchadnezzar's saying there, he's like, have you ever wanted to turn to God and go, what are you doing? Lord, what are you doing? Well, I got news for you. Nebuchadnezzar figured out you'll never figure out what he's doing. Because God never works right in front of you. He works over here. He works over there. He works behind you, and you'll never see what he's doing. But he's working it out for your good, in your favor. I always love to tell this story, and I'll probably tell it again Sunday because it goes with being thankful. But I don't know if y'all have ever read the story. I usually tell it a lot, and I enjoy the story. But if y'all have ever read The Hiding Place from Corrington Boone, her and her sister Betsy was in those concentration camps, and all that, where they put them Jews and all them in concentration camps, and they put them in all these different places, and these soldiers would come by these certain places where these ladies were and would abuse them. Y'all with me? But where Corrington Boone was and her sister, they never did come by and mess with them. Because that little camp that they were in was infested with flies and lice. And so Betsy always, Corey would read that verse over in 1 Thessalonians, be thankful in all things. And Betsy's sister's like, you mean to tell me we got to be thankful for these lice and these bugs? And Corey says, I don't know what God's doing. Be thankful in all things. And when they got out, they realized that's the reason those soldiers stayed away from them and didn't abuse them, because of the lice and See, you can't see what God's doing right in front of you. He's working over here and over here and over here. You don't know what he's doing, but he's working it out for your good, and he's trying to help Nebuchadnezzar. He's trying to work it out for his good, and that's what he was saying. You never can look at God and say, what are you doing? You're not going to know what he's doing. So that's what he means. Verse 36, at the same time, my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and brightness returned unto me, and my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol, praise, exalt, honor the King of heaven, all whose works are true, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride, he is able to abase. He said, I walk. There's his testimony. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, after those 7 years, he wandered in like a beast. He came to his right mind. They put him back as king in Babylon for 1 year. He was until he died. And he was king in Babylon for 1 year. And he was restored. And this is what his testimony was. He said, if you walk in pride, I am a walking testimony. God will bring you down. And when he was remember he was walking around his palace. He looked, this is what. And Nebuchadnezzar says, now on the backside of this thing, Nebuchadnezzar says, God gave me this. And it's a big difference. So you see Nebuchadnezzar's power, you see his privilege, you see his pride, you see his punishment, and then you see his proclamation. And his proclamation is, there's not but one God. And it took the Lord 4 chapters and a bad dream and 7 years wandering around eating grass to get my attention. Now, God tried to do the same thing with Pharaoh and it didn't work. All those kings, God tries to get their attention. Nebuchadnezzar, it worked. Some it don't. And isn't it an amazing thing? Now, I know that was long, a lot of reading. I know it was 37 verses. But you had to get that whole story because Nebuchadnezzar tells, and it is, I'm telling you, it's prophetic. That tree, a man turning into a beast. There we go. Mystery, Babylon, 666. 7 years. Wander around. Revelation 13, and I saw a beast come out of the sea, right, having 7 heads, 10 horns. It's all there. Same thing, chapter 4 of Daniel. It all goes in together. Anyway,